It was the winter of 1944. The Atlantic Ocean lashed against the sides of the troop ship, tossing prisoners of war like rag dolls across the deck. Cold wind cut through their thin uniforms, bringing shivers that went straight to the bone. The German soldiers clung to railings and ropes, eyes squinting against the spray of salt water. Waves crashed over the bow, and in the distance, the jagged silhouette of New York Harbor began to emerge. For many, it was a sight they could hardly comprehend. Among the group was Hans Müller, barely 21, with calloused hands and hollow eyes from months on the front lines. He had survived ambushes in the Ardennes, artillery barrages that flattened villages, and nights where frostbite and hunger gnawed at his resolve. Yet none of that prepared him for the scale of what he now saw. The skyline was dominated by cranes taller than any cathedral he had known, warehouses sprawling into the distance, steam rising from ships docked in perfect alignment, and soldiers moving with an efficiency that seemed almost inhuman. "Look at it, all this, and not a single thing out of place," muttered another POW, a wiry man named Dieter. His eyes darted from crane to crane, watching the rhythmic lifting and stacking of crates. How can they move so much so quickly?" Hans could not answer. He simply stared, absorbing a reality that seemed more a dream than truth. The soldiers herded them off the ship onto a dock bustling with organized chaos. Crates of food, weapons, and medical supplies were unloaded with a precision that defied belief. Every man seemed to know exactly where to go, what to do, and when to do it. There was no shouting, no frantic motion, only a relentless, steady flow of work. Once processed, the prisoners were loaded onto trains bound for the Midwest. The journey inland revealed a stark contrast to the war-torn lands they had come from. Villages were intact, fields productive, trains ran on time, and towns thrummed with energy and activity. Factories dotted the countryside, their chimneys belching orderly plumes of smoke. Trains transported supplies as if the movement of mountains had been choreographed. For Hans, this was unlike any landscape he had known. In Germany, entire cities were ruins. Here, civilization pulsed with mechanical life. At Camp Hereford, a sprawling facility in the heart of the Midwest, POWs were assigned to daily labor. They were given cots, blankets, and hot meals, luxuries that Hans could barely comprehend. Many had survived months of half rations, frost-bitten nights, and endless marching. The warmth of a heated barracks and the sight of steaming bowls of soup was almost surreal. Hans was assigned to work in a logistics warehouse, alongside other prisoners under the watchful eye of American supervisors. Each crate, box, and barrel had a place, a record, a purpose. He moved supplies under strict supervision, noting the rhythm of the work, the meticulous cataloging, the precision that went into every task. A single misstep could disrupt the flow, yet the system functioned flawlessly. Every crate had a number, every shipment a record, and every worker a clear role in the larger operation. Through these days, Hans began to grasp the enormity of American industrial capability. He witnessed assembly lines producing tank engines with almost alarming speed, dozens a day, fully tested, ready for deployment. Compared to the rationed, slowed production he had seen in Germany, it was astonishing. Entire battalions could be supplied faster than a single artillery unit could expend its ammunition. Factories operated like clockwork, each movement calculated, each machine synchronized with human hands and minds. The POWs were given structured routines: wake, roll call, work assignments, meals, and enforced rest. Yet even within these routines, Hans noticed something extraordinary. The Americans moved with an almost serene efficiency. They laughed, they joked, but they never slowed. Discipline and humanity coexisted seamlessly. Guards, too, were strict but fair, issuing commands in calm, measured tones. Their expectations met instantly. There was a sense of order, of purpose, that seemed as impenetrable as steel. On weekends, supervised excursions allowed prisoners glimpses of American towns. Hans walked cobbled streets lined with shops, windows aglow, children playing in the snow. Families sat down to dinner, warm light spilling from windows, unaware of the war raging across the ocean. He observed shops stocked to the brim with goods, the bounty unimaginable for someone from bombed-out Germany. "They have everything," whispered Dieter. "Everything and more, it's impossible." As weeks turned into months, Hans's perception deepened. He began keeping a small notebook, sketching warehouses, assembly lines, and transport systems. He noted the paths supplies took, the cadence of work, the interlocking steps that made the system almost invincible. Every observation underscored a truth that terrified him. This was not just a nation with soldiers. It was a nation capable of sustaining endless war through organization and productivity alone. Inside the workshops, Hans worked alongside civilians and enlisted men. He moved crates, monitored supply manifests, and occasionally watched mechanics repair engines and vehicles. He noted their efficiency, the careful sequence of tasks, and the minimal margin for error. Every movement counts, he thought. In Europe, survival often depended on luck, improvisation, and brute force. Here, survival, success, and dominance were embedded in every bolt, every calculation, every mechanical rhythm. Even in the mess halls, the scale was overwhelming. Food arrived in abundance, portions measured, never wasted. POWs could scarcely imagine such consistent logistics. Meals, sanitation, and even entertainment were orchestrated to sustain morale, maintain health, and ensure efficiency. Hans realized that this system, this industrial might, was as formidable as any army on the battlefield. At night, in his bunk, Hans would lie awake thinking of the contrast between his war experience in Europe and this country of perpetual motion. He recalled the towns reduced to rubble, the screaming, the hunger, the endless fear, and then, in his mind, he saw the factories, the warehouses, the convoys, the perfectly organized rail systems of America. It was a humbling, almost paralyzing revelation. War, he understood now, was no longer just about courage or tactics. It was about the capacity to sustain, to produce, to organize beyond imagination. By the time Hans was repatriated to Germany, he carried memories that few of his comrades shared. He had witnessed an entire nation functioning like a single organism, every part contributing to an unstoppable war machine. European victories and defeats seemed insignificant compared to the relentless momentum of this industrial titan. What he had learned would stay with him for life. In modern war, production and logistics could win battles long before soldiers set foot on a battlefield. Decades later, historians would reference accounts like Hans's to illustrate the decisive power of American industrial production. Testimonies of stunned POWs provided an unprecedented insight into a nation's ability to marshal resources, organize labor, and sustain war on a scale unimaginable in Europe. It was a lesson not just in war, but in human capability, organization, and foresight. For Hans Miller, the lesson was personal, profound, and unforgettable. The fear he once knew, of artillery, ambushes, and frostbite, was replaced with a quiet awe for a civilization capable of overwhelming force without even raising a gun. The POWs had returned to Europe with a clear understanding. No single soldier, no unit, could hope to match the industrial might of America. The lesson lingered like a ghost in their minds, a measure of power that transcended conventional combat, one that would shape their understanding of the modern world forever.